Stephen Curry confronts Kerr, "Stop managing me. Start trusting me." They lost by 18. At home. On national television. The fans were quiet. The bench was quieter. But inside Stephen Curry's head, the noise was deafening. Another fourth quarter. Another 6-minute bench stint. Another game where the Warriors let it slip, without their leader on the floor. And Steph had finally had enough. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw a towel. But the way he walked past Steve Kerr in the hallway, eyes locked, jaw tight, everyone knew, this wasn't going away. The Golden State Warriors had built their empire on trust. Trust in movement. Trust in selflessness. Trust in Curry. But now, that trust felt conditional. Steve Kerr, ever the orchestrator, was rotating his lineups like it was still 2015. Load managing minutes. Keeping Steph fresh for April. But it was March. And they were barely clinging to a play-in spot. Steph wasn't tired. He was pissed. Post-game, the locker room was silent. Draymond ripped off his jersey, muttering to himself. Klay sat motionless, towel over his head. The young guys stared at their phones, pretending not to notice the tension. Steph walked straight to his locker. Didn't speak. Didn't shower. Just sat. Kerr came in, clipboard still in hand. "Steph," he started. "We'll review the minutes tomorrow." "I had to." Steph didn't look at him. "You had to manage me?" he said, quietly. Kerr froze. "You're not managing my minutes, Steve. You're managing your fear of me getting hurt. You're coaching like I'm already gone." And with that, Steph stood up, slammed his locker shut, and left. The next morning, the Warriors' facility felt different. Everyone arrived early. Not for extra drills. Not for film. To see what would happen next. Kerr called a player-only meeting. But Steph wasn't there. He was already on the court. Sweating. Shooting. Grinding. As if to say, "I don't need meetings. I need minutes." By midday, the whispers had started. "That didn't feel like Steph," one assistant told a reporter anonymously. "He's always been calm. But this was personal. Because for Steph Curry, trust isn't a slogan. It's sacred. And Kerr had violated it." That afternoon, the coaching staff reviewed film. Steph sat in silence as they broke down a third-quarter collapse. At one point, Kerr highlighted a bad rotation by Jonathan Kuminga, but quickly moved on. Steph raised a hand. "Why aren't we stopping there?" he asked. Kerr hesitated. "We've addressed it before. It's a growing pain." Steph nodded. "But when I miss a switch, we pause for 5 minutes." The room went still. Kerr smiled awkwardly. "It's different." "Yeah," Steph cut in. "Because I'm held to a standard, and they're held to excuses." The message was clear. He wasn't just angry about minutes. He was angry about being managed, like a fading statue, not a cornerstone. Later that night, Steph met with Kerr privately. No cameras. No staff. Just two men who had built a dynasty, now standing on opposite sides of a philosophical divide. "I'm not your project," Steph said. "I'm your anchor." Kerr sat back. "You're 36, Steph. We have to be smart." Steph shook his head. "You don't get to call it smart when we're losing. You don't get to sit me and then ask me to save games when it's too late." Kerr leaned forward. "I'm protecting your legacy." "No," Steph said coldly. "You're shrinking it." The next game came quickly. Against Denver. National TV. Sold-out Chase Center. Kerr kept his word, kind of. Steph started hot. Hit 4 threes in the first quarter. But in the fourth? He sat again. For 6 minutes. By the time he returned, the Nuggets were up 11. They lost by 9. And Steph didn't speak post-game. Not to media. Not to teammates. He just walked off. Straight to his car. The media jumped on it. Rift between Curry and Kerr? Golden State dynasty crumbling from within? Steph Curry, mismanaged, misunderstood? And for once, the silence from both men spoke volumes. Because it wasn't about PR anymore. It was about power. And whose voice would define the Warriors moving forward. Days passed. Practices grew tense. Young players felt caught in the middle. Klay tried to joke it off. Draymond barked harder than usual. Looney, the ultimate neutral, just kept his head down. But Steph? He watched everything. He was done asking. He was waiting. Then came the Sacramento game. Down 5 with 4 minutes left. Steph had just hit back-to-back threes. Crowd on its feet. Arena pulsing. Kerr called timeout, and subbed him out. For a rookie. The arena booed. Loud. Steph sat, stunned. And for the first time in his career, he shook his head at Steve Kerr. On live TV. They lost again. And this time, Steph did speak. Not at the podium. Not to reporters. To the team. Behind closed doors. He stood in front of the entire locker room. Took a deep breath. And said, "I love you all. But I'm not gonna lead from the bench. I'm not gonna be the guy you point to when it's convenient and sit when it's critical." He turned to Kerr. "Stop managing me. Start trusting me. Or just be honest and say you don't." No one moved. No one breathed. Even Kerr didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say. After that night, everything shifted. Steph played 42 minutes against Minnesota. They won. He played 40 against Memphis. Won again. And then came the moment no one expected. Steve Kerr, in a press conference, admitted fault. "I overthought some things," he said. Steph's voice matters. "Maybe I got too careful." It wasn't a full apology. But it was enough. Enough for Steph to nod. To lead. To breathe. The Warriors made the playoffs. Barely. But inside that locker room, something was restored. Not dominance. Not nostalgia. But respect. Because Steph didn't walk out. He didn't sulk. He didn't demand a trade. He demanded trust. And got it. Legacy isn't always built in championships. Sometimes it's built in moments where a man says, "I'm still here. Let me lead." And for Steph Curry, that moment wasn't a buzzer beater. It was 4 words. "Stop managing me." And a stare that told Steve Kerr, "You either believe in me, or we're done pretending." The playoffs were brutal. Golden State barely made it past the play-in. The 8 seed. No home court. No rest. Steph's minutes shot up. His usage spiked. And yet, he never asked for less. Because this wasn't about minutes anymore. It was about moments. And in those moments, Steph wasn't just playing. He was proving something. Game 1 against the Nuggets. They were down 17 in the third. Jokic was picking them apart. Steph told Kerr during the timeout, "Leave me in." Kerr hesitated. Then nodded. Steph dropped 24 in the fourth. They won by 1. He didn't scream. Didn't flex. Just walked to the bench and said, "That's why you trust me." But trust, once cracked, doesn't fully repair overnight. Behind the scenes, Kerr was walking on a wire. Balancing his vision of team basketball with the reality of Steph's greatness. He wanted ball movement. Steph wanted the ball. And every time the Warriors lost a lead while Curry sat, the spotlight turned back on Kerr. Why bench him? Why now? Even the national media started asking. Stephen A. Smith shouted it on First Take. Why is Kerr still load managing a guy who's giving you 40 a night? Internally, the locker room was evolving too. The young core, Kuminga, Moody, Podziemski, they were watching how Steph carried himself. And they weren't just inspired. They were choosing sides. One assistant coach said it quietly after a late April game. The kids aren't listening to Kerr the same anymore. They're watching 30. And that's when the power dynamic finally shifted. Not by force. But by gravity. Game 5. Series tied 2-2. Steph has 36 through 3 quarters. Timeout. Kerr walks over. You good for 2 more? Steph doesn't answer. He just walks back onto the court. The Chase Center explodes. And for the first time in months, Kerr doesn't sub him out. They win. Steph finishes with 44. No rest. No rotation limit. No minute cap. Just fire. And when the buzzer sounds, he walks past Kerr. No handshake. No words. Just a look. It says everything. Kerr, in the post-game presser, finally folds. We're past the point of managing minutes. We're riding Steph. That line echoes through the media, the locker room, the entire franchise. And just like that, it's official. Steph's in charge. But power isn't free. The deeper they go into the playoffs, the heavier the burden becomes. Steph plays hurt. Ankles. Back spasms. Bone bruises. He never mentions it. Reporters ask if he's okay. He smiles and says, "I asked for this." Because when you demand trust, you carry the weight of it. The Warriors make it to the Western Conference Finals. Nobody saw it coming. And behind closed doors, Kerr finally calls a private meeting with Steph. No tactics. No film. Just 2 men. Kerr speaks first. "I should have trusted you sooner." Steph looks up. "I wasn't loud enough sooner." Silence. Then Kerr says, "We've got 4 wins to go. I'm with you." Steph nods. And that moment? It heals more than any system could. They don't win the finals. They fall in 6 to the Celtics. But the journey reshapes everything. Not because of a trophy, but because the franchise remembered what made it matter. Believing in Steph and Curry. Not managing him. Trusting him. That summer, Kerr extends his contract. So does Steph. No drama. No leaks. No politics. Just commitment. And behind the scenes, they start planning. Together. Like they used to. Because dynasties don't fall when they age. They fall when they stop trusting the foundation. And for Golden State, that foundation isn't a philosophy. It's a man. Number 30. Still standing. Still leading. Still saying, quietly, "Believe in me, and we've got a chance." Summer didn't feel like summer. Steph's phone stayed mostly dark. No interviews. No brand launches. Just quiet. He took his family to Lake Tahoe, his reset ritual. Normally, it worked. The water, the silence, the distance. But not this time. Because this wasn't about a tough loss. This was about what almost fell apart. In San Francisco, the Warriors front office was reeling. Bob Myers, the architect, had quietly walked away. His contract expired. No press conference. Just a statement, time for a new chapter. Steph knew it was coming, but not like this. He texted Bob one sentence. "You were the glue. We'll feel this for years." Bob didn't reply right away. 3 days later, he sent one line back. "Make them listen to you now." Training camp approached with a strange tone. Steph showed up early, like always. Same smile. Same rituals. But his voice? Sharper. During a defensive drill, a rookie missed a rotation. Kerr started to explain, but Steph stepped in. "Run it again." The room turned. Steph wasn't yelling. But there was weight in his voice. And it was clear, this version of Curry was done waiting. Klay approached him that afternoon in the gym. "You good, bro?" Steph kept shooting. Swish. 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 Then he stopped. Looked up. "I'm tired of babysitting our potential." Klay nodded. "I know." Steph hesitated. "Do you?" For the first time, Klay didn't answer. Behind closed doors, Steve Kerr held a staff meeting. Whiteboard filled. Notes stacked. But his eyes weren't on the clipboard. He looked at his assistants and said, "I'm losing the room." The word stung. This was the coach who revolutionized the league. Who let freedom reign. Who built a culture. But now? He was being questioned by the very system he birthed. Then came the players-only meeting. Draymond was talking. Loud, passionate. Steph cut him off. "I need to speak." The room hushed. "I've led by example. By sacrifice. By letting others eat first. And what has that bought us? Silence. I'm not stepping back anymore. I'm not being load managed, speech managed, or handled." He looked around. "If we're going down, we go down playing through me." No more discussions. Even Draymond stayed quiet. Because when Steph raised his voice, you listened. Kerr met with him the next morning. In his office. Just the two of them. Steve looked exhausted. "You know why I love you, right?" Steph nodded. "I don't need love. I need alignment." Kerr leaned back. "Then lead." "I'll get out of your way." Steph stood, extended his hand. Kerr took it. They didn't say another word. But something had shifted, forever. The season started differently. No benching in key moments. No forced rotations. Steph averaged the most minutes since 2016. And the Warriors? They surged. Not dominant. But deadly when it mattered. They clawed their way back to the top 4 by Christmas. And every time Steph hit a dagger 3, he didn't celebrate. He looked toward the bench. At Kerr. At the rookies. At the logo. Reminding them all. "This is my house." The All-Star break came. Steph declined the three-point contest. Not out of fatigue. Not out of pride. But focus. "This year isn't about flash," he told reporters. "It's about fight." The message rippled through the league. Because when the nicest guy in the NBA stops smiling, that's when you should worry. In February, ESPN published a feature titled, "Has Steve Kerr Lost the Locker Room?" It quoted unnamed players. Referenced analytics. Cited 2 anonymous assistant coaches who claimed Steph was steering the ship now. Kerr didn't respond publicly. But Steph did. After a blowout win over Dallas, he walked into the media room. And said, "Steve didn't lose the locker room. He gave it back to the players who built it." A statement like that? It's not defense. It's a takeover. March. The Warriors were surging. They won 10 of 12. The offense was humming again, but this time, through structure that lived and died by number 30. Poole was gone. Kuminga found confidence. The bench played freer. But it all orbited around Steph. Just as it always should have. Then came the Denver game. Again. Same opponent. Same pressure. Same court. Fourth quarter. Tied game. Steph calls his own number. Isolation. Step back three. Bang. The crowd loses it. But this time, Steph doesn't point to the heavens. He points to the bench. To Kerr. Kerr smiles, genuinely. Respect, restored. No power struggle. Just power. Shared. Post-game, Kerr said. This is what leadership looks like. He didn't ask for more control. He earned it. And I trust him. It was subtle. But for those watching closely, it was a passing of the baton. Not from player to player. But from system to soul. April arrived. Playoff seeding on the line. Steph was playing 40 minutes a night, and still practicing next morning. Reeves, Moody, even Wiggins had begun echoing his phrases. Play through the standard. Set the tone before the tip. Clay, watching all of it, finally approached Steph again. This time, with clarity. You were right. Steph nodded. You think it's too late? Steph smiled, gently. It's only too late if you stop listening. Behind the scenes, ownership watched the cultural shift with awe. Joe Lacob told his son. We thought we had 5 years left with him. But we might have 5 more. That wasn't hope. That was belief, restored by one man's demand. Trust me. The playoffs began. They weren't favored. Vegas gave them a 9% chance to make the finals. Steph didn't care. He played like every game was a debt being repaid. Not by him. To him. They swept the first round. Second round went 6. Steph averaged 38. And by the time they reached the Western Conference Finals, the league was no longer asking about Kerr. They were asking, can anyone stop 30? They didn't win the title that year. Boston was deeper. Younger. Hungrier. But it didn't matter. Because the Warriors rediscovered who they were. Not because of schemes. Because of surrender. Not Steph to the system. But the system to Steph. Postseason. Locker cleanout. Steph stood at the podium, alone. A reporter asked, what changed this year? Steph paused. Then said, I stopped asking to be trusted. I demanded it. And when they gave it, we remembered who we are. The dynasty may never return to what it was. But something better happened. Something rarer. The leader didn't walk away when he was doubted. He spoke. And when Steph Curry finally raised his voice, the entire organization found its silence. Because legacy isn't just built on trophies. It's built on the moments when a man refuses to be protected from greatness. When he looks his coach in the eye and says, stop managing me. Start trusting me. And then proves why the trust was overdue. The finals loss didn't feel like failure. It felt like survival. Steph walked through the tunnel, head held high, but inside, the noise was back. Not regret. Not anger. Just questions. How many more years like this could he take? He drove himself home. Alone. No entourage. No post-game dinner. Just his car. The road. The thought. If they don't believe in my voice now, maybe they never will. At the next morning's exit interviews, Steph was the last to speak. His tone was calm. His message was not, I'm not looking to be protected, he said. I'm looking to finish what I started, without a muzzle. That quote ran everywhere. Podcasts. Talk shows. Twitter. Steph wants more control. Steph wants the offense to run through him. Steph is challenging Kerr's authority. But they all missed the point. Steph didn't want power. He wanted purpose. 3 weeks passed. The headlines died down. But inside Chase Center, the tension remained. Then came the call. Steph texted Kerr, meet me at the facility. Justice. No agents. No PR. Just 2 architects sitting in the rubble of what they built. They met in the film room. Not to review tape, but to confront truth. Kerr looked tired. Older than he had months ago. Steph looked sharper. Eyes clear. Shoulders squared. I know you love the system, Steph started. Kerr nodded. I do. Steph continued. But we're not building a museum. We're still trying to win. Kerr leaned back. I was trying to protect you. I didn't ask you to. Silence. I wanted to extend your run. You almost ended it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Steph stood up and walked to the screen. Pulled up clips. Isolation buckets. High pick and rolls. Vintage stuff. Let me show you who I still am. And he did. For 45 minutes. No arguing. Just proof. The game was still in him. More than ever. Kerr sat quietly, watching the man he once freed, now demanding to be unchained again. When it ended, he stood and said just one line. "We run it your way now." The shift didn't take long. Players were called into the gym 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Steph stood at the center. "Things are going to feel different," he said. "Because they are." He walked them through plays. Expectations. Roles. Not yelling. Not begging. Just leading. And for the first time in years, the room followed. Meanwhile, the front office started asking uncomfortable questions. Should Kerr get an extension? Should they target a young star? Would Steph even resign after next year? And then Steph walked into Joel Jacobs' office. No lawyer. No rep. Just him. "I'm not retiring," he said. "But I'm not waiting either. Give me pieces. Or give me clarity." They gave him both. A trade was made. A vet shooter. A bruising wing defender. Subtle moves, but ones that told Steph, "We hear you." And that's all he ever wanted. Training camp felt like year one again. Kerr adjusted drills. Steph spoke more in film sessions. The young players began asking him for play calls. And Draymond?